After seeing what they saw, the sailors screamed, but it was too late. They had to escape. "Do you see that?" shouted Anna, the ship's navigator, her voice cutting through the salty air as she pointed off the port side. Her eyes, usually calm and steady, were wide with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Jonas, the captain of the Macon, swung the wheel with practiced ease, shifting the yacht's direction slightly. His weathered hands gripped the polished wood as his eyes narrowed, focusing on the distant horizon. The water, which had been a perfect sapphire blue just moments ago, now held a sickly gray hue. It rippled strangely, almost as if the ocean floor were rising toward them, defying all of nature's laws. Before Jonas could fully comprehend what was happening, the boat gave a sudden lurch. The movement was so unexpected that even he, with his decades of experience, felt his stomach drop. "What the hell?" Jonas whispered under his breath, the words carried away by the wind. They weren't on water anymore, that much was clear. They were stuck on something that shimmered and undulated like stone, yet moved with an uncanny fluidity. A vast, endless desert stretched in all directions, replacing the familiar blue expanse of the Pacific, and yet this desert was by the sea. Jonas's gut twisted as the Macon sat motionless on what should have been miles of deep sea. It wasn't sand beneath them, it was something else entirely, something that shouldn't exist. Not here, not in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. "We've run aground," shouted Frederick Branson, the ship's mechanic, though his voice cracked with disbelief. His hands, usually steady and sure when working on the yacht's engines, trembled slightly as he gripped the side of the boat. "But there's no land anywhere near here. It's impossible." Anna furiously checked the GPS, her fingers flying over the screen as she tapped at it with increasing desperation, her brow furrowing deeper with each passing second. "No, this doesn't make sense," she exclaimed, frustration evident in her voice. "We're in the middle of the ocean, there shouldn't be." She was interrupted by a loud boom rolling across the water like distant thunder. The sound was so powerful that Jonas felt it in his chest, a deep vibration that seemed to shake the very air around them. He turned toward the sound's source, his blood running cold at what he saw. Not far away, a black pillar of smoke rose from the sea, and with that, the ocean itself seemed to be moving, writhing like a living thing. As Jonas watched the impossible scene unfold before him, his mind drifted back to the events that had led them to this moment. He had felt restless for days before they set sail, a nagging feeling in the pit of his stomach warning him that this voyage would be different. It wasn't logical, they had made this trip countless times before. But Jonas had learned long ago to trust his instincts when it came to the sea. The crew had set sail from Tonga's Vavayu Islands, a routine route for experienced sailors like them. The Macon, a sleek 50-ft yacht that had been Jonas's home for the better part of 2 decades, was on a simple expedition, charting out lesser-known parts of the Pacific. It was the kind of trip they had done dozens of times before, a chance to explore and document the ever-changing face of the ocean. Jonas, Anna, Frederick, and the others were no strangers to these waters. They had faced their share of rough seas, sudden storms, and even near collisions with other vessels. But this time, from the moment they left port, something had felt off. The sea was calm, too calm. There was an eerie stillness to the air, as if the world were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. "Feels like the ocean's holding its breath," Anna had said on their second day out, unknowingly echoing Jonas's own thoughts. She stood at the bow of the yacht, her eyes scanning the horizon with a look of unease. Jonas had nodded in agreement, a shiver running down his spine, despite the warm tropical air. The crew of the Macon carried on with their duties, checking equipment, plotting courses, and maintaining the yacht, but the strange quietness left everyone uneasy. Their conversations were muted and tense. The horizon was usually full of life, distant islands peeking out of the mist, seabirds wheeling overhead, the occasional other vessel cutting through the waves. But not this time. It was just them, alone in a vast emptiness that seemed to stretch on forever. And now here they were, stranded on an impossible island in the middle of the ocean, watching as the world around them transformed. The ground beneath the yacht felt solid, unyielding in a way that water never should. Frederick, always the practical one, knelt down and ran his hand along the side of the ship. His fingers came away covered in a strange, gritty substance. He scooped up some of it, bringing it close to his face for inspection. It crumbled in his hands like fragile rock, leaving behind a fine pale dust. "Pumice!" he screamed, his voice a mix of awe and disbelief. "We're sitting on pumice, but how? There's no volcanic activity for hundreds of miles." Jonas's mind raced, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. He remembered reading about underwater volcanic eruptions and how they sometimes spewed pumice stone onto the surface. It was a rare phenomenon that could create vast floating islands of lightweight rock. Still, sailors who had spent their entire lives at sea almost never witnessed such an event. As he stood at the helm, gripping the wheel as if it could somehow guide them out of this impossible situation, the ground beneath the yacht trembled again. The sickening boom echoed across the water, closer now, sending ripples through the floating pumice field. And that black pillar of smoke continued to rise, twisting and thickening as it billowed skyward, blotting out the sun and casting an eerie twilight over the scene. "We need to turn back," said Frederick, his voice tight with fear. He looked at Jonas, his eyes pleading for a solution, hoping for some way out of this nightmare. "Whatever is happening is not good. We need to get out of here while we still can." But Jonas wasn't listening. His eyes were fixed on the distance, where the smoke met the horizon. That's when he saw it, a jagged mass emerging from the sea, dark and formidable. At first it looked like a massive reef breaking the surface of the water, but as he watched he realized it wasn't coral or rock. It was land. New land being born before their very eyes. "What is that?" asked Simon, one of the younger crew members, his voice trembling, betraying the fear that they all felt but were trying to hide. Simon had joined the crew just a few months ago, full of enthusiasm and a desire to see the world. Now he looked like he wanted nothing more than to be back on solid ground. "A volcano," Anna replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She had moved to stand beside Jonas, her eyes wide as she took in the scene before them. "We're witnessing the birth of an island." Jonas had heard about this sort of thing happening deep in the Pacific, the Ring of Fire. They called it a vast horseshoe-shaped zone of intense volcanic and seismic activity. But to see it with his own eyes, to be caught in the middle of such an event, was something entirely different. They were sitting on a floating raft of pumice, and just miles away the ocean was literally birthing land. Another explosion rocked the air, this one far louder than the last, sending shock waves through the water and the pumice field. The new landmass was growing visibly, its edges sizzling and crackling as hot lava met the cool ocean. Steam billowed up in huge clouds, adding to the apocalyptic scene. For a brief moment, Jonas felt an odd sense of wonder. The Earth itself was reshaping before them, a process that usually took millions of years happening in a matter of hours. It was terrifying, yes, but also awe-inspiring in its raw power and majesty. But then a low, ominous rumble began beneath their feet, snapping Jonas back to the reality of their situation. The floating pumice field shuddered, and cracks began to appear on its surface. When they all realized what they were seeing, they screamed, but it was already too late. Frederick's face went pale, all color draining away as he realized the full extent of their predicament. "We need to get out of here now," he said urgently, his voice tinged with a panic Jonas had never heard from his usually calm mechanic. Jonas reached for the wheel, his captain's instincts kicking in. But as he tried to maneuver the Macon, he realized with growing horror that they were stuck. The yacht was lodged firmly on the floating pumice, its hull trapped by the very phenomenon they had come to study. He tried the engine, but it wouldn't catch. The intake was likely clogged with pumice and ash. The yacht wasn't going anywhere. Panic flickered in his crew's eyes, the tension rising as fast as the volcanic plume that continued to billow into the sky. "We're not moving," Anna said, her voice shaky. She looked at Jonas, her eyes wide with fear. "We're trapped." Then another explosion came, one so intense it knocked Frederick off his feet. The sea roared beneath them, and the floating pumice field shifted violently. The black smoke thickened, blocking out the sun and plunging them into an eerie twilight. For the first time in his life, Jonas felt truly powerless in the face of nature's fury. Then suddenly it happened. The water beyond the yacht began to recede rapidly, as if being pulled away by some invisible force. The seafloor was visible now, a jagged, unnatural landscape of newly cooled lava and ancient rock formations. Jonas watched in horror as a massive wave began building on the horizon, a monstrous wall of water, its crest frothing with volcanic debris. Jonas's heart dropped. He knew what this was, something far worse than just a volcanic eruption. It was a sight he had hoped never to see in his lifetime. "Tsunami!" he screamed, his voice cracking with the force of his shout. The crew scattered frantically, trying to free the yacht from its pumice prison, but it was already too late. The wave, created by the violent eruption and the sudden displacement of water, was barreling toward them faster than any of them could react. Frederick Jonas yelled, his mind racing for any possible solution. "Get back to the engine. We've got to try." Frederick rushed below deck, his fingers fumbling as he fought to breathe life into the dead engine. The yacht groaned, creaking under the strain as the wave advanced. With one last desperate turn, the engine sputtered, then roared to life. Go, Anna screamed, her voice barely audible against the roar of the approaching wave. Jonas yanked the throttle, pushing it to its limit. The Macon lurched forward, barely skimming over the uneven pumice field. For a heart-stopping moment it seemed they would remain trapped, but then, with a sickening crunch, they broke free, the hull scraping against the pumice as they surged forward. The yacht sped ahead, its bow slicing through the churning water as the raft of pumice collapsed behind them, swallowed by the monstrous wave. Jonas gripped the wheel with all his strength, fighting to keep the Macon on course as they rode ahead of the tsunami. They clung to the yacht as it was tossed like a toy in the roiling sea. The deafening roar of water filled the air, drowning out their panicked screams. Debris from the eruption pelted the deck, and searing hot ash rained down from the sky, but somehow, miraculously, the yacht stayed afloat. The wave thundered past, taking the pumice and debris with it, but the Macon remained, bobbing wildly on the water. As the initial surge passed, they found themselves in the midst of a chaos of currents and eddies, with the ocean still unsettled from the massive disturbance. Jonas clutched the wheel, his knuckles white, his heart hammering in his chest. They had survived, barely. But the danger was far from over. The volcano continued to spew ash and smoke into the sky, and the sea around them was a minefield of floating debris and treacherous currents. For hours they battled the elements, struggling to put distance between themselves and the newly formed island. The Macon had taken a beating, its hull scraped and dented, but it held together, a testament to its sturdy construction and the skill of its crew. As night fell, they finally reached calmer waters. The glow from the eruption was still visible on the horizon, a reminder of their brush with disaster. The crew gathered on the deck, exhausted but alive, each lost in their own thoughts about the extraordinary events they had witnessed. Jonas looked at his team, a surge of pride welling up in his chest. They had faced the impossible and emerged on the other side. But he knew that their adventure was far from over. The world would want to know about what they had seen, about the birth of a new island in the midst of the Pacific. In the days that followed, as they made their way back to port, news of the eruption spread. Around the eruption site, the world had changed. What the sailors had witnessed was nothing short of extraordinary, a rare underwater volcanic eruption that had birthed a new island. For weeks, scientists flocked to the area, eager to study the phenomenon. But by the time researchers reached the site, much of the new island had already been washed away by waves. What had once been a towering mass of molten rock was now little more than a smoldering pile, gradually crumbling into the sea. Nature, it seemed, was as quick to destroy as it was to create. As Jonas watched the news from the safety of his home, he felt a pang of nostalgia. What they had seen, the birth of an island, the raw power of nature, was something few would ever experience. But it was fleeting, a reminder of the constant change that shaped their world. For Jonas and his crew, the memory of that day lingered in their minds, a day when they had witnessed the unimaginable. They had survived the wave, but the ocean had claimed the land. In the end, nature always won. If you were Jonas's crew and faced an unexpected volcanic eruption and tsunami in the ocean, how would you react? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below, and thank you for listening to this thrilling tale of survival and the raw power of nature. Join us for more intriguing stories like this one.